I personally like to explore new and different RTS games, and especially those which innovate in the way units or armies are controlled. And Battleplan is probably one of the most innovative such games in that regard, because even if it does give you some manual control over individual units, you get a pen to draw orders for entire companies and armies right on the map as you play in real time. Since the demo version of Battleplan is playable during the Steam Next Fest, which you can download from its store page using the link in the description, I wanted to give you some tips, as even with a good tutorial, this kind of RTS gameplay is so different from the norm that I wish someone had made such a video before I played it.
We've got a major engagement.
So after you set up your own commander persona and the name and insignia of your corps, you go over to the Army Constructor, which is a very funny name for an army customization menu in a World War II themed game. It is here that you have to try to match your officer's specialty with the corps composition, as some officers can boost a certain unit type, while they also carry some debuffs. These are divided into personality quirks, passive and active skills. This is where you also have to learn how to connect or disconnect individual units to their commanders or sub-commanders. When you click on a connection line and press the delete keyboard key, you remove a connection, while if you click on top of a unit's card and then draw and click on the bottom of the commander's card, you connect the two. The only problem I found with this system is that when you buy a new unit from the right side menu, it is always added at the far right of the board, meaning if you want to connect it to your first officer's formation, you have to drag it or its connection across the whole army board. I hope the devs change this system by the time we get to play the full game. And I also hope they let us select multiple units to connect to the same commander. If that is already possible and I didn't figure it out, tell me in the comments how to do this. So while this tutorial is well made and it teaches you the basic commands and orders for making and executing your own battle plans, its most important lessons come last. Because learning how to encircle an enemy army or take over its field supplies turn out to be the most useful battlefield skills to know when you face a true battle. This is because, as the old saying goes, an army marches on its stomach, and units cut off from supplies by being encircled, or if their battlefield supply depots are captured by the enemy, will slowly lose both its morale and combat effectiveness. This makes winning much easier by cutting enemies off from their supplies or stealing their supplies, and they will eventually just surrender. While battles of attrition and frontal assaults will mostly end up stalling, especially against enemies who had time to dig in, which units do automatically the longer they remain stationary. Now let's get ourselves into a medium-sized battle where we get to lead multiple army corps and learn how to not just encircle enemies, but how to first break through their lines and into an opportunity to do so in the first place. This battle is set in northern France, with the enemy army already bottlenecked with the ocean and English Channel at their backs, and our units cutting them off from the mainland. With 5 army corps under our command and a somewhat straight front line, we have to get creative from the start. This is where understanding each commander's order is of crucial importance, and why the devs put in these small GIFs to better explain each one to the player, which I think was a very good design decision. You can look through these as you try to decide which order to give to each individual army corps depending on their situation on the ground. You will notice the option at the edge of the screen to auto-place units, and you can do so to speed up preparations, but I am going to do it manually. Interestingly enough, you are not allowed to issue any offensive orders, but only defensive orders until you click on the Start Mission button, so this is a sort of preparation phase rule. And even more interesting is how some corps are concentrated in local towns while others are stationed on the front line with counterattack orders already given. This is the starting order of battle, but since we haven't pressed the start mission button yet, we can change this setup. For example, I want to draw a hold line defensive order for this corps, and that'll get all the units spaced out across the front line. As I personally didn't like the look of that bulge at the front line and expected to get my corps there flanked, I wanted to straighten that line a bit and drew back my exposed corps. I must admit I didn't expect the ability to redistribute the starting battle lines like this, but here too the game surprised me with how much flexibility it gives to its players. So by doing something similar with the remaining undeployed army, I was far more satisfied with how the front line looks for the eventual start of the mission. And it is only now that you get the full array of orders to give out to your corps, including offensive ones, and those specific to specialized units like engineers for clearing or setting up minefields, and artillery for their long-range barrage. Now this is when you have to practice actually drawing these orders, as the pen movement is bound to the starting point and an area is what you draw, not an open line that you have to come back to close. It's a bit of a harder system to get used to, but I guess it was easier for the devs to have a closed area rather than to pray the player would be able to close his own area right where they wanted. Anyway, this is where I decided to change my plan a bit, as I wanted to make a breakthrough here, but knew I had to make sure there were no mines there to begin with. The terrain also looked like it would give me good access to the enemy's back line, and if I can fold one of their flanks, I can flank and even encircle the center and other flank eventually. What you should know here is that friendly units of an army corps become immune to minefields when escorted by nearby engineers. When you finish drawing orders for an individual army corps, it is very important not to forget to click on the green check icon to execute these orders. Otherwise, if you click on Finish Planning without doing this, none of the orders will be followed. Since I had to concentrate a lot of firepower and personnel to pin the enemy in other positions so they can't help those which I plan to attack with my breakthrough, I put in a lot of artillery barrage orders to my other army corps. But do keep in mind, artillery barrages spend a lot of supplies, while damaged units get replacement manpower during the night. So just sitting back and bombing enemies isn't going to get you a win on its own. Now when it comes to using the breakthrough order, you have to remember that it makes an army corps form up and act as a slow moving fist that forces its way into the enemy line. This is why it is best given to an army corps that is already formed up together, rather than one that is stretched over the front line. With the plan set for one flank in breakthrough, I just had to make sure to set the army corps on the other flank into a defensive mode with hold the line and lay minefield orders. As for the center, I needed enemies to be occupied and not move over to help the ones I planned to break through, so I chose the move to contact orders for one of the middle army corps and drew that at the middle of the front line, while I gave the barrage and seize ground order to the other. That should keep the enemy's middle occupied for a long time. Once I click the Finish Planning option, everything goes into motion and we find out just how badly will my plans survive their first contact with the enemy. If we look over the whole front line, we can see which corps are firing with artillery, which moved up to engage, place minefields or just scout the front. It does indeed take a lot of time to properly get into the dynamic part of the gameplay in Battleplan, but that just makes it more satisfying when everything comes together. Because the battle is fought in real time, you can follow the clock up on the top right and also see the green hue on Army Corps orders, which means those two are time sensitive, and you can see the exact number of hours some of those last by the number above it in the Army Corps order UI. Better yet, you can edit those numbers in the planning phase so an artillery barrage can be manually extended for more than just 3 hours. Be careful though, as that spends a lot of supplies, which are shown at this part of the UI at the top left and are slowly regenerated by your backline, but not enough to sustain an offensive indefinitely. While you are overseeing the battlefield, you might notice that something isn't working out according to what you planned, and the game is flexible here too, so you can use the red X sign and cancel an order on each Army Corps order UI. But you can't give new orders unless you click on the button at the top right and issue emergency orders, which you can only do once a day. With so many ways to fix mistakes and change plans mid-fight, you might start to think the game is too kind to the player, but personally I think it is totally fine for two reasons. First of all, this isn't multiplayer, and second of all, it's much better than saves coming. So after a few days of fine-tuning my original plan, softening up the enemy, mining and demining the front line, and mixing up different offensive and defensive orders, I had a huge concentration of forces at a single point of the front line, which then slowly started to fold backwards, and my breakthrough was finally happening. The one downside of such a concentration of units is that it becomes a prime target for enemy artillery to shoot at, and units under an enemy art barrage get reduced combat stats. At the end of every day of operations, you get into the night phase and get a report on how well your army did that day. Your units get resupplied with manpower and some units shift positions to better prepare for the next day of operations. Now you can edit your commands or delete them and start anew depending on the situation at hand. But now we come to the most crucial part of the battle, the one where you hunt down enemy field supply points in order to cut them off from local resupply. And because you can't see these supply depots all the time, you have to give your army corps an order to seize ground on a wide area so they will spread out and eventually run into those supply depots. Once you hear this announced,
Supply depot captured.
you will know the battle is shifting your way. Now it is very important to keep your units close to those newly discovered and captured enemy supply depots, because he will try to retake them. As you can see here, my plan is finally giving fruit, as an entire enemy army corps is cut off at one flank, and while they might have a supply depot and will be able to hold out for a while, ultimately they are already defeated.
We've received reinforcements.
At one point in this particular battle, I get reinforced with an almost entirely mobile army corps filled with tanks and vehicles, which is the perfect type to drive straight through the hole in the enemy line I have already made and hunt down their other supply points or hit their course from behind and encircle them. Now, what might look like a done deal after these reinforcements join the battle can quickly turn into a big problem. And again, it is because of supplies. Because as you can see here, not only did my tank army storm into the back of the enemy positions and took over another supply depot, but they themselves became cut off from allies and main supply routes. The situation was dire enough that I had to use the resupply command for that army corps on the supply depot point, but that makes the whole corps become exposed to enemy counterattacks as they are not in a combat ready state while under the resupply order. I even managed to have another army corps end up in a similar situation during this battle to capture the main city at the north of the map, and this just goes to show you that you can be your own worst enemy in Battleplan if you overreach and forget the basic gameplay elements this game is built upon. After a few more days of hard battles, I eventually encircled the remaining enemy corps and prepared to attack the main objective. Capturing this town took a lot more preparations, including what I already showed you about clearing mines, artillery barrages, seizing territory, and preparing breakthroughs. I hope that after watching this video and learning all my tips, you will be able to finish this demo much more easily than I did. For many more demos you can play during the Steam Next Fest, check out my videos linked as cards on the screen or links in the description. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!